My name's Pete Woods, you're watching Hexhamtv. Who are you?
Hi Pete, hi everyone watching. I'm Joe Morris, I'm the Member of Parliament for the Hexham constituency.
So Joe, thanks very much for doing this interview and also for your weekly columns in the Hexham Courant. It's refreshing to have representatives who are prepared to be interviewed and also talk about what they've been doing in their work and how they represent local people. You've finished your first term in Parliament. How's it been?
I mean, first of all, it's been a tremendous privilege to be the MP for the area that I grew up in. I think, I feel I've hit the ground running. Been speaking in a lot of debates. I've secured Westminster Hall debates on issues that are really central to our area, including school transport, including the future of sheep farming, including future of tourism in our beautiful part of the world. I've spoken up for jobs, I've spoken up for housing, I've spoken up for our young people, I've spoken up on SEND. I think myself, my office, we've really hit the ground running. And after 100 years, I think, of this constituency being taken for granted by the Conservative Party, it's been a real privilege to be able to give voice to people who've not felt they've had that voice before.
So it's generally acknowledged that the Labour Party have inherited a very difficult situation. Some would say the worst inheritance of any incoming government. But you and the Labour Party have also made some controversial decisions. And I'm just going to sort of raise a few of those with you so that you can respond, so people understand the reasoning, perhaps, that you've voted the way that you have. So the first one, we're in a rural community here in Hexham, mostly rural. You've voted for inheritance tax on farming. This can have a big impact on some people who live and work in the community. Tell me about why that decision was made and why you chose to vote on this issue.
Well, look, first of all, that motion was brought by the Conservative Party. It was an Opposition Day motion that was deliberately dressed up by the Tory Party. I will take no lectures from a Conservative Party that did absolutely nothing for farmers in the 14 years they were in office. They signed trade deals that disadvantaged them. They completely botched the Brexit process, and they completely botched the rollout of other schemes. We inherited a financial situation that was, quite frankly, on fire. If you start a new job and the finances are not what you were told, you have a duty to be really honest with people that you have to make some difficult decisions, that you have to look beyond what you talked about while you were getting that job and look at how you get things back onto a level. So I've been really privileged to engage and to meet with farmers. I went to a farm the week after the budget, I went to a farm the week after that. I've met with farmers both in my Westminster office and in the constituency, and I've had phone calls with them both before and after the budget to talk about the issues that matter to them. Now, my focus is on making sure that our rural communities, our farmers, get the support they need, and that British farming returns to being a profitable enterprise, as under the Tories it simply ceased to be.
So do you accept, though, that some farms will not be able to be passed on to younger generations, and indeed some farms may decide not to invest in machinery and the farm itself because they think that they're going to have to pay large amounts of inheritance tax in the future?
I think what's really important is that anyone who thinks they might be affected gets independent advice. It's not my position, nor is it the position of any MP, to start offering broad-ranging tax advice that could have major implications. What we need to do is to make sure that farms get back to being profitable so that any tax that is payable is not ruinous, so that any tax that is incurred is something that can be borne over that 10 years interest-free period. Because ultimately that is the way that we fix British farming, is making sure that farms can be profitable, can be run, and that we can have food security in this country, and that we can continue to underpin good, well-paying jobs in our most rural communities.
Now, the pensioners' winter fuel payments, there will be people out there now who are restricting their heating, perhaps restricting their food, because the government have decided that some people will not be getting their winter fuel payments this year and going forward. Tell me about why that decision was made and why you think it's the right decision.
Well, first of all, again, if you come into a financial situation that's on fire, you have to make those really difficult decisions. It was not something that we wanted to do. Everything that we've had to do is a consequence of the Conservative failure and the Conservative dishonesty about the state of our economy. In that context, though, we are maintaining the triple lock on pensions, which the Conservatives broke in office. They broke their own policy. We are not going to do that. We brought forward the Warm Homes Scheme. We brought forward the Household Support Fund, so that if anyone is in need during this period, that they can reach out for support, and I'd urge them to do that. I'd urge them to get in touch with my office directly if they've got financial concerns about the winter period. But ultimately, the reason that we had to take the decision that we took is because of the absolutely toxic inheritance that we came across. We need to fix our country. We need to make sure that we no longer have a position where the government is spending significantly more than it earns and is disguising that fact. As politicians, you have a duty to be honest with people, and that's not just being honest when it's an easy decision or when you think it might make you popular. It's being honest about when you have to take the tough decisions and why you have to take those decisions.
Talking of unpopular decisions, Joe, most recently the decision's been made not to give compensation to the WASPy women, the women who were told at short notice that they would have to work on from 60 to 66 to provide parity with men, but they were told at short notice, and many of the WASPy women, well, all of the WASPy women would say that notice wasn't sufficient and it's adversely affected them. There have been payouts to other groups. Why was it decided that the WASPy women wouldn't be compensated?
It's important, first of all, to remember the financial situation that we're in, with that 22 billion black hole, with the fact that the previous government had announced compensation schemes and then not found any money to fund them. And that kind of thing fundamentally erodes trust in our democracy. Now, I'm not going to make any promises that I can't keep. I've always, whenever I meet with constituents, whether it's privately, whether it's publicly, I will always open by saying that I'm not going to make any promises that are beyond my control. The decision to not award compensation was clearly a very tough one. It was one taken by the government that we simply could not afford. And I think that the real ire needs to be on the Conservative Party that completely bungled a lot of these issues, that failed to set aside money for many other compensation schemes, but that also, I think, frankly, attacked some of the WASPy women. While we haven't been able to award compensation due to fiscal circumstances, we have committed to learning lessons going forward, and I know that for many people that won't be enough, but ultimately we do need to make sure that we're really honest with people, even when that is really tough.
I hear what you say, Joe. But if we look on social media, we can see lots of Labour senior politicians standing side by side with WASPy women prior to the election, promising that they will, try and support them in the future, and then many women will think, well, we've been let down, we've been fed false promises. Do you think that sort of thing, particularly when there was a relatively small amount of money, I know it adds up to a lot of money, but a relatively small amount of money compared to what was lost by some women, was recommended by the local ombudsman? Does that not undermine confidence in the government generally when they go against the independent ombudsman? I
think when you read those placards, it says that you're going to work with them for a fair outcome. Ultimately, when you come in and the financial situation is as bad as it was, you do have to consider that fair outcome in the broader national context, right? You have to consider the overall impact on the public finances. The fact that if you're going to have to find £10.5 billion, which is a significant amount of money, if you're going to have to find that, it's going to have to come from somewhere else. And therefore, I think it's not a decision that was easy to make. It's something that we need to, as a country, be incredibly angry at the Conservatives for leaving an incoming government in this situation. For, I think, let's be honest, deliberately taking the pins out of hand grenades and put them in desk drawers all across Whitehall, so that the Labour government would come in and find that we have a country that is, as we all know, that has been on life support for a long time, and that Labour have to get us back to fighting fitness.
Now, you've been photographed holding a placard suggesting that you support a ban on hunting. Why do you think it's important that you were seen to hold that? Why have you taken that view?
Well, it was in our manifesto. I pledged to support an end to fox hunting in our manifesto. I stood in that manifesto. I remain firmly behind it. Animal welfare is one of the things that drove me into politics. It's something that I make no apologies for.
Joe, you've been speaking up in Parliament on a number of different issues. You've mentioned some of them. You've been representing local people. Just give us a taste of some of the things that you've raised and how you feel you've represented Hexham in Parliament in this, your first initial term representing the constituency.
Thank you. So yeah, I've had opportunities to raise issues like the Tyne Valley Railway line, which I raised at Transport Questions. I recently had a meeting with the Rail Minister about it to discuss the impact it has on commuters, the impact it has on young people trying to get that first job, but having to travel for it. I've also raised issues around jobs for young people, around SEND, which I used my first Prime Minister's question to raise, which I'm very proud of doing so, and I'm very keen to continue working on the issue with people from across the political spectrum. I've also raised some of the other issues, access to housing for young people, the importance of fairer school transport and better school transport to get people from some of our most outlying rural communities into school to get the education they deserve and to minimise the impact on families. I've raised issues around the future of farming. I know it's something that, as you said, has been quite a controversial issue, but I have been standing up for our farmers and pushing government to do better on a lot of the issues that that farmers in the constituency have come to me about, to make sure that we see that improvement. I've also taken the opportunity to speak up on rural housing. One of the main bits of casework that comes through my office is people who are wanting to, are simply unable to find the housing that they need, the housing that they want to have, and frankly unable to remain in the area where they grew up. I'm incredibly proud, incredibly privileged to be the MP for the constituency that I grew up in. One of the real moments of sadness about that for me, though, is I'm so much less likely to bump into the people that I was at school with than I am to bump into their parents or grandparents, because people in our communities quite often don't want to move away but are forced to move away because of the unavailability of local housing. And the unavailability of local jobs, and that's something that the previous government simply did not make a priority, and it's something that will always be one of the priorities for me, to make sure that people who are going through, whether it's Prudhoe High School, whether it's Hayden Bridge High School, whether it's QE in Hexham, or whether it's Ponteland High School, or any other schools across the constituency, that they can, if they want to, make their home in the community where they grew up, and we can continue to draw in young families and to continue to make sure that we've got the jobs and the support and the services that those families need.
If I was to ask you, Joe, 3 big things that have changed since the Labour Party was elected into government that impact upon local people here in the Hexham constituency, what things would you mention?
So we've started the process of taking our railways back into public ownership, which is going to have a massive impact on making sure that our railways are well run and in the public interest and not in the interest of profit. That's going to have a huge impact for people, whether you're commuting to Newcastle, whether you're commuting to Carlisle, whether you're using the railways to get about, or whether you have to go from our part of the world down to London or up to Edinburgh or out to any of the other major cities in the UK for work or for study. That'll have a huge impact on you. We've also brought in Great British Energy, which is going to play a key role in decarbonising our energy sector. I'm 33 years old. Climate change will define the rest of my life it'll define the rest of all of our lives. And we need to urgently take action to make sure that we have that renewable energy network and that we're getting as much of our energy as possible from clean power by 2030. That's an ambitious goal, but it's one that we can and must hit. I think the third thing that I'd say is we've brought a culture of honesty back to government. People don't want easy promises made, they don't want easy answers. We need to have a government that's prepared to own up and to say when things simply aren't deliverable. Now, that might be tough sometimes, that might be uncomfortable for politicians like myself sometimes, but ultimately, if we're going to run away from the big issues, if we're going to run away from the problems, we're never going to actually deal with them. And for too long, the last government would come across a difficult issue, punt it into the long grass and simply not deal with it. I think that whatever we do, we need to make sure that we hand the country on in a much better place than we found it. That's the fundamental job of government, and that's something this government is focused on, rather than, as the Conservatives did, playing political games with people's lives.
Now, any MP can only do so much but they need the support of staff who work in your constituency office and in your parliamentary office. Tell me a little bit about the sorts of inquiries you've had through your office and the number of inquiries since you became a Member of Parliament for Hexham.
So I will say that the weirdest thing about becoming an MP is you basically get given a laptop and that's you going, and I couldn't be doing the job that I'm doing without the support of my wonderful team, who are doing a really fantastic job in really quite challenging circumstances. We've had 12 surgeries, we've dealt with 1,500 inquiries from people in the constituency. That's from policy issues all the way through to some really complex individual casework. That is my priority, and as soon as I'm able to be in the constituency playing an active role, I have to be down in London to be in the chamber speaking up for us, but as soon as I'm able to get back to the constituency and start doing surgeries, I'm back up to Hexham, which is to the Hexham constituency, which is my priority. MP staff do a phenomenal job, and it doesn't matter which colour of the rosette their MP wears, they're all often they're the unsung heroes of our democracy.
What would you say are the main things that you're looking at going forward into 2025, Joe?
So I'll continue to be speaking up on transport issues that we face across the constituency, whether that's buses in Throckley, whether that's the lack of connectivity between some of our most rural towns, whether that's the Tyne Valley line that's regularly brought up. I'll be continuing to work on however I can best engage with the local community, whether that's through continuing to do the surgeries or also looking at alternative ways of engaging, making sure that we're doing that. And also speaking up for the constituency in Parliament. I want to be the MP that brings good jobs and good homes to this constituency, because that is what makes a day-to-day difference to people's lives. And I think I'd also say that I've been really privileged since I became the MP to welcome schools to Parliament, to go in and visit some schools. I've had a fantastic opportunity to welcome my old history teacher down to Parliament when she brought some sixth formers from Queen Elizabeth down, which certainly made me feel a bit older, and just really marked what a fantastic school system we have in this part of the world and what fantastic teachers we've got, because I wouldn't be sat here without the support of all the teachers that I had at QE throughout my time before I left school.
Joe, I just want to thank you and all people who put themselves forward for public office at whatever level, whether that's nationally, regionally or locally, and whatever rosette they're wearing, whatever constituency they're representing, because it's really important that people put themselves forward and represent their local areas effectively. It's a tough job. You get a lot of flack, but you can make a real difference. And whether people support you through that or not, that's their decision. But to actually stand up and represent a local constituency is a very big thing. And I want to thank you, previous MPs and local councillors and current councillors as well, and wish you all a very Merry Christmas from Hexham TV.
Thank you very much. Thank you for saying that. That's really kind. I think we have a really important job as MPs to be as inclusive as we can be, and to remember that ultimately we've got a lot more in common than what divides us. Politically, I've got friends who hold very different views to me. I've got friends who didn't vote for me. But it's fundamentally, anyone who's watching this who needs help, please do reach out to my office. We're always keen to hear how we can help. And wherever you are, wherever you're watching this, whatever part of the constituency you're in, have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Joe Morris MP, thank you very much for talking to Hexham TV.
Thank you.